Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching The Political Vigilante, bringing back to the show, friend of the show, Richard Medhurst. Richard, how you doing, my friend?
Hi, Graham. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm all right. It's good to see you. It's good to see you.
Likewise. I'm glad you're remonetized as well. That's good news. They just kicked my channel in the backside, so I know how it feels.
Yeah, I saw a lot of especially with people speaking out against Israel's treatment, all of a sudden all these channels started just kind of mysteriously mysteriously started losing and all of that. So they're back, and here's one of our fans right here, Alex, or Alfred Das Liebe, Master Bruce. These earlier times work because in some ways Leah's backsided with guests, but yeah, I know some of you, those of you who watch the show in Europe, I know the earlier start times are a little better for you. It's kind of, the majority of my audience obviously is in the United States. So that's why I do the 5 o'clock, which is West Coast, 8 o'clock East Coast. But I understand, and I try to sprinkle in some earlier start times for everybody, for those of you in Europe and abroad. So, Richard, we've had you on the show before to talk about Julian Assange. We've had you on to talk about Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. And since October 7th, it's really been ramped up. And what is interesting to see in the last week is how even the narrative on social media is very much changing to, hey, wait a minute. More and more people are calling out Israel, 13 days of nonstop bombing. And it's kind of hard to hide from that. And their propaganda machine is pretty powerful. So what have you, I guess you're following this very closely. So bring us up to speed as to what is happening and what you're seeing from your end.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of calling out the Israelis, it's certainly gotten better in terms of people and public awareness, but when it comes to what governments are doing, it's actually worse, because now it's like, if you call for a ceasefire, you're a Hamas sympathizer, whatever that means, so we're back in this 9/11 framing where it's like, all Arabs are Muslims, and all Muslims are terrorists, and all terrorists are Hamas, and it's like everybody lumped into one category, which is ridiculous. I mean, Israel just bombed the oldest church in Gaza. It's been there since the 5th century. It's survived, every crusader campaign and every invasion, and it's for the last 1,600 years, and they destroyed it. They killed a whole bunch of Christians. And I don't see any of these, evangelicals whining about that, or criticizing Israel, or asking why is it killing Christians.
Right.
Someone in Congress, his family members were among the dead. So it's incredible how you're not even allowed to talk about what the Israelis are doing. They've banned protests in Germany, in France, and in England now. You've had people being arrested just because they've been wearing a Palestinian flag. They didn't do anything, they didn't say anything, but they're wearing a Palestinian flag. So even though you have these record numbers of people coming out, you had 100,000 people in London, which is good to see. It's just not enough. They've gotten really I don't want to loosely throw around the word fascist, but it's really in that direction. If not all the way, because everything is upside down, and they want you to think that the Israelis are the victims. They're not the victims. This did not start on October 7th. Okay, the world did not begin on October 7th. This has been going on for 75 years. Hamas would not exist were it not for Israel's behavior. Hezbollah would not exist were it not for Israel's behavior. And the thing is that they want you to think these are terrorist groups. Who says they're terrorist groups? By definition, they're guerrilla fighters. The Geneva Convention is very clear on this, and they've been singing about supporting Ukraine for 2 years now because they want to liberate their land. Guess what? Palestinians also want to liberate their land. They've been trying to do it for 6-7 decades now. So, it's just really interesting.
I got to interject that the insanity of hypocrisy from the West and the United States specifically of, we're supporting the freedom fighters in Ukraine.
Right.
You know, Russia's trying to take their land, but Hamas is not, they're bad. Like it's stunning to me to watch. And
Yeah.
they're
the government. Hamas is the government in Gaza. They're democratically elected. That's it.
And it's so, yeah, it's so crazy that then they never respond. There's no mention of the 2.3 million people in Gaza, which is basically an open air prison.
Yeah.
And
those are hostages.
Pardon?
Those are hostages, like actual hostages.
Yeah. And I always say, like, okay, if you're in favor of Israel, would you live there? Would you go live in Gaza? Would you be, you know, if there was 2.3 million Israelis treated this way, no way would this be allowed to happen. There's no way.
Exactly.
And I see similar hypocrisies. And then just to like, well, if I say I'm free Palestine, well, then, oh, you support Hamas, you support the killing, you know, it's like, that's like saying, are you for Black Lives Matter? Oh, you support the Bloods and the Crips then. If you're for Black Lives Matter, you support you support criminal gangs. Right. And the leaps in logic are rather insane. And I guess I'm trying to find some sort of sliver of hope or a ray of light, because it is a pretty dark situation. And you see the videos of what is happening to Palestinian civilians and children.
It's too much. It's really too much.
It's too much. It's hard to watch. And the sliver of hope, I guess, is the numbers of people out there protesting, which I don't know that I've seen these numbers in my lifetime. Of like 100,000 people in all these cities and people in New York, and also to see a lot of, you know, like Jewish Americans or just Jews and Israelis coming out saying this Israeli government is wrong. Like we don't agree with what they're doing, because in the whole world, and many people are really of all different ethnicities and religions and faiths and countries are speaking out against this bombing and against this very coordinated genocide. That seems to me like in my lifetime, I never saw this many people publicly protesting and speaking out. So that seems to be a good thing. But again, America is just doing what America does, which is just doubling down on war. And
you would think the United States is the first country to support the Palestinians, because, you know, it's supposed to be against British colonialism, right? Fighting for independence. You would think the US would be the first one to hand them weapons and say, go get your freedom. But, you know, it's
well, America has a rich history in going against its own principles. If you watch the documentary, The Fog of War, it talks about how Ho Chi Minh visited this country in the late 1940s, saw our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, and thought, oh, America will absolutely support the Vietnamese against French colonialists.
Is this with McNamara?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I remember it now. Yeah.
Where McNamara is, and it shows you how ignorant America was in particular in that situation, but also just like, oh, there's profit in war. And this is like, you know, and Ho Chi Minh, rightfully so, went, oh, the French colonies are trying to take over, so of course America is going to back us. And we didn't.
Unfortunately not. Yeah, it's really I don't know. It's like a sad irony. And actually, speaking of Vietnam, you know, the Tet Offensive in January 1968 is very similar to what just happened on October 7th, because the Viet Cong, they completely took the U.S. forces in Vietnam by surprise, and now Hamas did the same thing. You know, I think the Israelis, they really got a bit too arrogant and cocky. They thought, like, no way someone is gonna paraglide over the fence. You know, that they spent millions and millions, if not billions, building. It's a very expensive concentration camp, I'll tell you that. You know, it's just, there's so much wrong with this. I mean, I every time they go and bomb Gaza, there's something wrong with it. And even when they're not bombing it, it's like, why? why is it okay for Israel to control what you eat or what you drink or how much you drink? Like, you know, if you can import cement to build your house after it was bombed the last time by the Israelis, you know, I think it's there's a lot wrong with this whole picture, and there's really a bigger, there's a big play going on, because you know the timing of this was not like some random accident. You remember Netanyahu went to the UN General Assembly in New York about 3 weeks ago, and he held up this piece of cardboard, this map, where he's showing an economic route that he's going to do as sort of a rival to the Silk Road, the new Silk Road, where it's going to go through the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and then Jordan, Israel, and then onwards to Europe. When the resistance, when I saw that, and when I say resistance, I don't just mean Hamas, I mean Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. When they saw this, it became very clear that, you know, this is either do or die, because Saudi Arabia is openly talking about normalizing ties with Israel. MBS was on Fox. He gave an interview talking about that, and Netanyahu went to the UN. So it became clear that, you know, if if they don't do anything now, the Palestinian cause will be forgotten. Like, Palestine is going to be lost forever, because Saudi Arabia normalizing ties, that's really the final nail in the coffin. And you can see that this did have an effect, because now that the war has begun, Saudi Arabia, you know, openly said that they had to put normalization with Israel on ice. So, you know, this is one of the reasons that this happened. I mean, the core reason, of course, we can always go back to, is that this is just unbearable. You know, this is unbearable to put you know, 2 million people, and half of them are children, they're under 18, you know, in on a strip of beach, and they can't leave by land, they can't leave by air, they can't leave by sea. It's a hellhole, you know, really, unfortunately. And the thing is that the United States and Britain made Israel and bankrolled Israel to be a colonial outpost. It's the biggest sphere, you know, it's the biggest sphere of influence for the West in the Middle East. And of course, I know Saudi Arabia is too, but Israel is really the major one. And so they're trying to protect it, because the whole resistance axis now is you know, up in arms about this. And that's why you're seeing, just a few minutes ago, the American bases in Iraq and Syria were attacked. The Yemenis were firing rockets. You know, Hezbollah have also been skirmishing with the Israelis on purpose to stretch their forces, have them go up north instead of south. So this is really a regional thing. People are afraid it's going to become one. It already is.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because it's really interesting how this is playing out in the global geopolitical landscape, because you've got Iran and Saudi Arabia made peace, which was earlier this year. That was a big move. Plus, you've got the BRICS countries. I really want to focus a little bit on the economics of this, because this is all about economics and global power, and I mean, and the long view, or the big view is, so when you've got the BRICS countries, you know, Brazil, China, Russia, India, South Africa, and now Saudi Arabia has joined it, and kind of sounds like Iran is joining it, or might be.
Yeah. They were admitted.
They were admitted. Okay,
which is very interesting. Yeah,
that is now the half of the world, if not more, of the world's power, money, and oil. If Venezuela joins, that's 2/3 of the world's oil. So, and America is really doing kind of very classic, page for page, historically. Yep. If it's like they're almost like in the White House going, how do we definitely do a declining empire? Like, how do we do it? Like, what do we do beat for beat? Like, oh, let's spread our army.
Make sure we lose.
Yeah. Let's, you know, resist wholeheartedly the fact that a new era is coming. Let's not try to make peace with anybody. Let's just take our iron fist and try to jam it up everybody's.
It's a shame. Yeah, it's really a shame.
Because Because America, the idea, I would say the idea of America is a great idea. The concept of a representative democracy, and we're the good guys and we're going to spread freedom. But at the end of the day, that's just great marketing and window dressing for just yet another empire that just kind of rebranded itself as the good empire. And, you know, we Americans still want to pat ourselves in the back for World War II. But since that time, there's been nothing but this trail of tears. So I want to ask you this. So how do you see all of this sort of playing out with all the BRICS countries are like, we're done using the dollar. I mean, America's now spreading itself. And Janet Yellen just said last week, oh, we can afford 2 wars. We can't afford Medicare for all or free college tuition, but we'll gladly pay for 2 wars. How do you see this playing out? As you're saying, it's not just Israel and Palestine. It is a regional conflict. And that regional conflict, China has come out and said, we support Palestine. They flat out said it. And so they have the biggest economy in the world. America won't admit that yet. We keep calling them the second economy, but they have the biggest economy in the world. It's like a guy that's 6'5" saying Shaquille O'Neal is a little bit shorter than me. No, he's not. So how do you see this playing out as somebody that pays attention to the region, and then how it pulls out globally and financially?
I covered this BRICS summit, and I was not expecting them to add any new members or announce this gold-backed trade currency, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that there are new members. And it's I think the fact that Saudi Arabia and Iran made peace, and again that was mediated by China, helped a lot. And by the way, just as a side note, that's not good for America. America used to position itself or posture as being the peacemaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's no longer the case. The Chinese have stolen that crown now. So yeah, I mean, it's good. It's diplomacy. But BRICS as an idea and an organization, it's become turbo boosted since the Ukraine war started. So now it's no longer, well, in the future it will expand or do this. No, it's already happening. It's happened, and it's continuing, and it's a reality. And that's why Netanyahu is going to the UN with a little marker and saying, oh, we're going to have a rival to the new Silk Road and all this crap. It's too late for that. And it's kind of a shame because, they always use this, like, we have an open door policy. They use this term about NATO, but like, seriously speaking, with BRICS, they really do have an open door policy. Anybody can apply. And they've never said we are against the West or we don't like the West or they can't join. On the contrary, they welcome everybody. And the Belt and Road Initiative is the same. That's why 150 countries have joined up. So you have this rival, I'm not going to say empire, just a rival system, shall we say. Not because they want it to be a rival, but America and the West and Britain see it as a rival that is overtaking them in many ways. As you said, it has BRICS has a huge portion of the world's population, the world GDP, the resources in oil and gas. So it's already a done deal. You can't change it. I think it's very important to see this in context with what happened in Ukraine with Nord Stream being blown up. They wanted to stop Russia being able to export gas and oil, and they got Iran also.
Wait, I thought Russia blew up its own pipeline to take away its one stream of revenue.
Yeah, right. After they already cut the gas off. So yeah, they did that, and then they got Iran sanctioned again. So again, no Iranian gas and oil, and then Israel all of a sudden is saying that they're an EU partner, and you have the head of the EU. She went to Israel and said that they're a gas partner now. And so Israel, they're really in a rush to get gas. Where do you have gas? You have it in the Mediterranean Sea, in Gaza, you have it in Syria, you have it in Lebanon. And there was a dispute with not even a year ago with the Karish gas field where the Israelis sent, like, I love this. It's like in a cartoon. They sent not just a ship, they sent a ship that will extract the gas like on the spot and take it with it. And Hezbollah said, if you just do one thing before we have settled the border dispute. I'm talking about the gas borders, right, in the Mediterranean Sea. They said, if you take just 1 cubic meter of gas, we will blow you to hell with the rockets that we have. And so the Americans sent a diplomat and they ironed it out. But still, Israel has failed to make up for the loss of Iranian and Russian gas and oil. And so this is another reason for what's happening in Gaza. That's why Israel are fighting like there's no tomorrow, and they're just massacring everybody. They're hoping that either the Palestinians will be killed off, or they will leave to Jordan maybe, or to even better yet, now to the desert. They want to throw them in the desert in Egypt, and they've been openly saying this. This is ethnic cleansing. I don't know how you talk about ethnic cleansing like proudly on like in a fucking press conference, and then get away with it. And the West are like, well done. So these are all very important reasons that play into this. And it's important to see it in that dimension as well.
Weird that somehow that oil is in the middle of all this. That's odd. We haven't had any wars as a result of oil. This is shocking news to me. No, but it also is. It makes perfect sense the way you explain that. It's why Israel, in addition, oil is at the root of its complete hypocrisy, that it won't acknowledge the Armenian genocide because it needs.
Thank you.
Yeah. It needs
exactly. It's taking from Azerbaijan, and exactly. That's also something really disgusting. That Azerbaijan, most of their weapons come from Israel, and they give them oil in exchange for that. And everything that's been happening in Nagorno-Karabakh is now out of the news, and nobody cares. And while they were giving all these weapons to Ukraine, they were only giving moral support to Armenia, like basically meaning hot air, like a couple of statements. This is like the French president was saying, no, we're not going to give them weapons, but we offer our support. What support? They already taken the land. They've kicked everybody out, and it's like it's not obviously it's not on the same scale as the genocide in World War I in 1915, but it's another repeat of this trauma where you have people being kicked out of their homes, forced out of their homes. And I should also just say that Azerbaijan themselves, they regard themselves as being one country with Turkey, right? So it's again like being kicked out of your homes at the hands of the same people. So this is another very sad thing.
And of course, oil is at the root, these and so how do you see this playing out?
Look, I think that Israel are in for a big surprise. They've gotten too arrogant. They think that this is the Israel of 40 years ago. It's not. Israel are weakened now. They have not been able to adapt to asymmetrical warfare, which is what Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, and the PMU are used to. How do you think Israel has nuclear weapons? How is it that Hezbollah were able to kick them out of South Lebanon, liberate South Lebanon, and then again wipe the floor with them in 2006? How is it that Iran, along with the PMU, were able to get ISIS and Al Qaeda out of Syria and Iraq? And now, as I said, the American bases, the only thing they're able to do is steal oil, but they cannot move. They're frozen in place, and they're constantly being hit with barrages of rockets. So this asymmetrical warfare, coming out of the tunnels, out of the ground in Gaza or in South Lebanon, Israel and America and Britain, they just don't know how to contend with this kind of warfare. That's why Israel has not gone into Gaza with the tanks, on foot. They're too scared. They're just good for bombing people from the air where they can't fight back when there's no anti-aircraft. But they're too scared to actually go in on foot, because the last time this happened in 2014, of course, Gazans made up the bulk of the casualties, of course, because they're the civilians and it's on their turf. But the Israelis still got their asses handed to them because they cannot adapt. So if they think that they can go in on with a ground offensive, Hezbollah is going to be drawn in. The Iraqi and Syrian resistance will destroy the American bases. In Conoco oil fields, Omar oil fields, Shaddadi oil fields, they'll all be gone. And then, Iran already has missile capabilities that can reach into Europe. So I don't really know if Tel Aviv wants to test these out,
but then doesn't that force America with its itchy trigger finger to then, because America has a carrier group in the Persian Gulf, to then commit ground forces, which Biden would love to do, because America would do some sort of false flag and some sort of, fake, Hamas blows up a shopping mall in Ohio or something like that. They do some false flag like
Right.
that. And then everyone would sign up, and then they'd be rolling, economic conscripts into the Middle East again, and
It
another
could
long,
happen.
which would help Biden's lagging approval rating.
Yeah, it could happen. This is the problem, and it's you know, Israel have always wanted to have America fight a war on its behalf against Iran. But again, I this thing could go either way. It's like, it's like with Ukraine. Are we going to have a nuclear war today or not? Who knows? It could go either way. But I think the fact that the Israelis won't go in on the ground or by on foot is such a a telling sign of where they stand. And Hezbollah, look at what Hezbollah have done. Just to give you an idea, first of all, they started lobbing mortars at the Israeli positions, and the Israelis immediately got so scared they started sending half their army up to the north in preparation. The Israelis had to evacuate 30 settlements, illegal settlements, of course, and now there's like a 10-kilometer buffer zone where it's just the Israeli occupation forces, on the front line with Hezbollah. Hezbollah destroyed around 70% of Israel's electronic warfare, radio and surveillance systems. So those are gone now. And then, Hezbollah also said, like, if you kill any one of us, and that doesn't mean someone from Hezbollah, but like the Reuters journalist who was killed last week, and Reuters didn't know who did it. I mean, just disgusting, honestly. So, Hezbollah's response, unlike Reuters, was that if you kill any Lebanese person, it's going to be an eye for an eye. And just by doing this, they have now caused chaos for the Israelis, because the people that are now, refugees because they've had to leave their settlements, they're putting a strain on the Israeli government and the services. The army are on edge and paranoid that any second, Hezbollah is going to come get them. This is also another way that the resistance is supporting the Palestinians.
Well, and that strain that you're talking about, it sounds like, is reverberating through the Israeli people, because there's a lot of protests against Netanyahu. There was a journalist in the Tel Aviv paper who, the day or two after the Hamas attack, said there's one person to blame for this, and that's Netanyahu.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, sorry, go ahead.
It seems like a lot of people within Israel, Israelis, are kind of they're fed up with Netanyahu. His strategy is causing them more problems. He's creating. I mean, I had Katie Halper on the show, and she's very much like, look, Netanyahu he's helping create more anti-Semitism in the world, and a lot of Israelis are starting to realize this. And he's just doing what right-wing, power-hungry dictators do. He's a right-wing fascist, and he's just like, we're going to jam the tanks down their throat. And it's like they've throughout history, so many of these guys led their country to ruin. I mean, sometimes they stayed in power a long time, like Pinochet did in Chile, but like Mussolini and all these other countries, there's a lot of examples where it's like, this did not go well for you. So do you see that as Israel is put on, is under stress militarily, but also society, and within Israel, there's a lot of protest. Do you see enough Israelis going, we've had it with this guy. We want to ceasefire because we want to preserve ourselves, because he's going to drag us into ruin? Do you think that there's enough will within Israel to do that?
I mean, Netanyahu is in big trouble since either way since the beginning, because of this corruption scandal, and it's what led to the protests. And I mean, he also wanted to get these reforms passed where the government has the final say, not the courts. So this is also another reason. And the thing is that I certainly think that he helped cause a distraction within Israeli society. I don't mean on purpose, but he just did. Through making people angry. And this is one of the reasons that weakened the Israelis and allowed the surprise attack on October 7th to succeed. It's not the main reason, but it's one of the reasons. It actually worked to the resistance benefit. Now the thing is with the Israelis, you know, I know the article you're referring to. It was Jerusalem Post, I think, right? And yeah, the thing is, you know, at the end of the day, even if there's an Israeli who doesn't like Netanyahu, if they're still living on an illegal settlement and they still took somebody's home, for Palestinians and even for Syrians, because Golan Heights in Syria is still occupied by Israel. The Sheba farms in Lebanon are still occupied by Israel. It doesn't really change anything whether it's like a left-wing Israeli or a right-wing Israeli. At the end of the day, they're still occupiers. So one thing you saw when this attack happened on October 7th, so many Israelis were running away, right? They were going to the airport and trying to leave. And this is, it's interesting because they have, that's a luxury to be able to leave. Palestinians cannot leave. The Palestinians don't even have one like proper passport. Ask any Palestinian when they travel how they're treated at the airport. The people doing, you know, in customs don't even know what their documents are because they don't have, remember, Palestine's not like a full member state in the UN. So they don't have a statehood, and you know, they even to get a visa is impossible already, so you can travel in the first place. And the Israelis, meanwhile, they've got like, you know, maybe dual citizenship. Some of them even have triple citizenship. I mean, if you look at every single Israeli prime minister, they don't come from Palestine. They're either born in Eastern Europe or Russia, you know, Poland, Ukraine, or their parents were born there or their grandparents. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with emigrating somewhere. But the thing is that Zionism was created as a movement where you know, where the idea was European, Jewish, Ashkenazi, you know, would emigrate to Palestine and then make a country of their own there and call it Israel. And so the thing is that this entity called Israel, it's taken land from everybody, from the Palestinians, from Syria, from Lebanon, and then made only Jewish settlers, you know, have a say in what happens, even though they're a minority. And then the Palestinians, they don't, you can't even call them second-class citizens because they're just not citizens. They're treated like subhuman. And that's on purpose. It's by design, because if you allowed Palestinians to actually have, you know, citizenship, then they would be the ruling majority. It would be an actual democracy, and they would actually have their way. But you know, the Ashkenazi elite that have run Israel, they don't want that. So you know, I think that's really important to point out. You know, they have dual citizenship, or even if you just have Israeli citizenship, you can go anywhere you like. You can go to the United States, you can go to Europe. You know, you have all these amenities and privileges that are afforded to you that Palestinians simply do not have. They're trapped inside of Gaza. They're trapped in the West Bank. They're trapped in Jerusalem. So yeah, I think when it comes to it, you're going to see what happened in Algeria. The French annexed Algeria. They didn't call it a colony. They call it France. They carved it up into 6, you know, basically like counties or states, if you will. Algeria is huge. They made it France. And in the end, when they had the War of Independence in Algeria, 1.5 million Frenchmen fled back to France, and Algeria, the Algerians took it back. You're going to see something similar when it comes down to it in Palestine, because the Israelis, they have the possibility to go elsewhere. They can actually go back home. Palestinians, this is their only home. They don't have anywhere else to go. And this idea that they should go to the desert so they can please, you know, like Netanyahu or whoever else is running the place. I mean, it's you know, this is ethnic cleansing. Should call it out for what it is.
Let's answer a question here. We have Deha Ko answering the question. Richard, what power do we have in the United States to stop the fighting, since we are the primary source of aid to Israel? Can the Israeli lobby be boycotted?
Are you an anti-Semite? I mean, okay, so I've been looking at all of the brands that they've been showing now that are participating in this. You know, like I saw, again, I've yet to verify this, but I think it's solid. That McDonald's, for example, are giving out free food to the Israeli Defense Forces. You know, so you've got a lot of brands, Burger King as well. I can't remember the other ones. I think Puma, that are associated in one way or another, and giving, you know, aid to the Israelis, whether it's food or something else. So boycott, divestment, sanctions. The idea behind that is that you boycott any brand that is aiding the Israeli occupation or being produced in occupied Palestine. So I would double check this list again. I would just advise people to go and check it out again. I'll post it later, or I can give it to you, Graham, if you want.
What is the list? Where do we find this list?
I don't know. I bookmarked it somewhere, but I need to fish it out. So I just wanted to make the point that you can boycott these brands. That's one way of helping. The second way of helping is raising your voice. But I know this is not easy for everyone, because you can lose your job, you can lose your income. They literally took away my primary source of income on YouTube now because I'm just doing my job. So I know it's not easy, but if you can, even opening one pair of eyes at a time, whether it's someone in your family or friends, it helps, right? The only reason that Israel gets away with this is because in Britain and America, we have a media structure that is designed to dumb people down and hide the truth from them. That's the only way they get away with it, because if people knew what is happening, they would be goddamn fuming.
Oh, there's no way. There's no way the West would let this happen if we saw the actual footage of like Palestinian kids getting bombed, crying because their parents were dead, bloody children. If America saw the reality of this, America would be like, what? And that's why like younger people are in America and the West are really leading the fight, because they don't watch CNN. They're on there. And if you go on social media, you're actually seeing these videos of what's happening in Palestine. You're seeing it. And people are like, nope, I ain't down with this, man. And so, because the AIPAC is a lobbying machine. It spends a lot of money. They spend a lot of money, mainly with the Democrats, but still some with the Republicans. Lindsey Graham obviously gets a lot of money from them. And then they also spend money on propaganda advertising. I mean, I had John Kiriakou on my show 4 years ago. This is in 2019 to talk mainly about Epstein, because Epstein had just hung himself with a paper t-shirt. And John Kiriakou, when I said, what was your first reaction when you heard about Epstein? He goes, well, Graham, and this is a video. You can go watch this. Kiriakou said, when I first heard about Epstein, I called a friend of mine that's still at the CIA, and he said, this has to be the Israelis, right? And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, Graham, there's currently 180 some Mossad agents operating illegally in the United States that America is aware of, that just kind of lets slide.
Right.
And I was like, wow, this is not some crazy conspiracy. This is an ex-CIA whistleblower, John Kiriakou, said this on this show. And I was like, man, so you see how effective the propaganda machine, even like that, the Hamas cut off the heads of 40 kids or whatever, that was completely debunked immediately.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And
they put it out there, and it's like they plant a seed in people's minds, and by the time they can see what actually happened, by the time the truth comes out, no one's paying attention anymore. It's too late. And I got the list in front of me. Sorry, just to interrupt, Graham. I got it in front of me. It's Domino's Pizza, McDonald's, Papa John's, Pizza Hut, Burger King, Puma, Carrefour, SodaStream, HP, Siemens, AXA, and Ahava. These are all brands that are aiding the Israelis in one form or another, and and participating in one form or another in this genocide in Gaza. So if you want to boycott them to help the Palestinians, then these are some of the brands.
Good to know. So this is a great question for you, Richard. Matt S., Shave Your Knuckles for Justice. Thank you for supporting our show. I'm still conflicted about the conflict between Israel and Hamas/Palestine. Got to give it up to Richard, though, for having strong journalistic bona fides. So how would you, what would your response to this be, Richard? Matt S. is a frequent poster in our chat. He's seems like a decent dude. He's a libertarian and doesn't always agree with everything I say, but he always asks in a very constructive way. He's not like a yelling at me kind of a all caps in the chat, Graham, you're a which I very much appreciate. And we should be able to have these kind of discussions and debates in a healthy manner. We should be allowed to have them. So what do you say to the people who, like Matt S. or anybody who's like, well, Hamas definitely has done some awful stuff. They do seem like a terrorist organization. And what do you say to that?
Well, Hamas did not exist, before the 1980s, and Palestinians were still trying to liberate their country. If I come into your house and I take, the living room and the kitchen and the bathroom, and I say you can have the dog kennel outside, and if you fight back, you're a terrorist. Well, I mean, you'd be well within your rights to bash my bloody face in. The UN Charter, the United Nations Charter, the Geneva Convention are all crystal clear. When someone invades your country, you can use any means at your disposal to get them the hell out, period. And the UN General Assembly reaffirmed this multiple times. There are so many UN Security Council resolutions telling Israel, get out of the Golan Heights, get out of the West Bank, get out of East Jerusalem. They don't listen. So, Israel doesn't care about international law. The law is very clear. Just like the Ukrainians were given all these weapons and told, they're freedom fighters and so on. I'm sorry, it doesn't get more freedom fighter than the Palestinians. They've been trying to do this now for 75 years. And even before 1948, it was a British colony or mandate, which is a nice word for a colony. Everything, it's funny because everything that they accuse Hamas of doing, the Israelis are doing themselves now. And they were doing it to get the British out before 1948. And when World War II was over, the biggest terrorist threat in the United Kingdom was these Israeli Zionist groups like the Haganah, like the Stern Gang, Lehi. These were groups that they invented the letter bomb. They were planting bombs in London. They blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. They killed dozens of British officers. So they were the biggest terrorist threat to the UK post World War II. If Palestinians did that now, they'd be called terrorists, right? Why is it okay for the Israelis to do it? Because they think it's their country when it's not. They're clearly emigrating from Eastern Europe and then claiming it's their country. So you see, there's a big double standard here, and again, it's not about Hamas. If it's not Hamas, then people say, oh, it's the PLO, and if it's not the PLO, then it's Hezbollah. There's a reason why you have these resistance groups, why they exist. The Hezbollah, again, it was created as a result of Israeli occupation of Lebanon. Hamas, Israeli occupation of Palestine. Syria also, has been fighting to free the Golan Heights since 1967. It's, this narrative that, it's because they hate Jews. What absolute rubbish. We have Jews in Syria. We have Jews in Palestine. We have Jews in Iraq and Morocco.
And there's Jews Christians in all of those countries as well.
Yes, exactly. Like my mother's side of the family, they're Syrian Christians. So, we've had all these religions living side by side in the Middle East for thousands of years because they come from the Middle East. So there's no problem here. The problem is European settlers coming to Palestine and trying to make a country out of it that they control and treat everybody else like crap. It's really simple to understand.
There's a great quote from an organization I just learned about called Orthodox Jews Against Zionism. And they said back in this area, before Zionism, before 1948, everybody got along. Everybody lived with each other. Yes. Everybody got along. Again, like you said, they were all Middle Easterners. So similar customs, similar food. I mean, and they all worked together and got along. And then they came from Europe and colonized it. And it's like, wow, and the thing that is true, I always make this parallel because I'm an Irish American, and England controlled Ireland for 700 years. And then in 1922, Ireland became its own country, and England went, you're your own country, but we're going to keep the northern part to ourselves.
It's still occupied. It's still
occupied.
Yep.
And they then harshly treated the Irish. And they went in Northern Ireland. I mean, they went after the Irish Catholics, and the IRA was formed. And
there you go.
The IRA would not have needed to exist if it wasn't for the harsh treatment from the British Empire. This is the British Empire was still at its peak. And when the Troubles arose, and there was a lot of stuff that led up, there's a lot of battles and skirmishes.
Hundreds of years
where the English crushed the Irish. There was uprisings. Again, they were mistreated. They were treated like second-class citizens. Irish people weren't allowed to go into movie theaters in England. They were, I mean,
you can join the army and fight in the wars, but you can't, you don't have equal rights.
Yes.
You can still join to this day.
Yes. And that's the thing. So let's talk about that. I know I have friends of mine who are Latino, and they grew up in Texas, and they had to sit in the in the balcony in America in the movie theaters. The Latinos and Black people had to sit in the balcony or had to go to their own theaters. The Irish weren't even allowed in the movie theaters. So the IRA, and did the IRA do some stuff in the 60s and 70s that innocent people died? Yep. Do I support that? Nope. But would the IRA have had to exist if it wasn't for the constant oppression from the English government? Of course not. So you can't.
Right. You can't just sit there and blame the IRA. And again, they were also, prescribed as a terrorist organization.
Yes.
And I'll just remind people, Bobby Sands was elected to parliament. He was an MP, and he died 40 days later because of hunger strike. This is an MP. So you see, like, the level of disrespect. It's like, even when you participate in the sham system, they will still crap all over you and treat you like a terrorist. And it's also worth noting that you had a lot of militias like the Ulster Volunteer Force, the UVF, that would specifically target Catholics, not IRA, just Catholics, and blow them up. And they were given training by the British state. They were giving resources and materials by Special Branch, by MI5 and MI6. This is a fact. So, who's the real terrorist?
Yeah, it was, again, England was pushing this stuff. The Ulster Defense Force was doing this horrible stuff, and the IRA had to respond. And again, prior to England doing that, Protestants and Catholics were all getting along.
There you go.
I mean, they were Irish.
And then they make it about religion. It's the same bullshit trick every time. It's this the sectarian crap. Like, oh, it's Jews versus Muslims, Protestants versus Catholics. No, it's not. It's nothing at all to do with that. It's about colonialism. It's about stealing someone else's land, subjugating them, and treating them like crap. Guess what? They're going to fight back, whether it's in Ireland or it's in Palestine. Period.
Yeah, man. Yeah. If you roped off Santa Monica, California, put a wall around it, made it an open air prison, and I couldn't get in and out of it, you better bet your sweet ass whoever was controlling that wall, I don't care who they are. I don't care if it's a bunch of guys that look like me. I'm going to get weapons and I'm going to defend myself. That I can guarantee you that right now. I don't care who it is on the other side of that wall.
It would be your right to do that.
It would be my absolute right to do that.
Not just morally, like legally.
Legally, it would be my right.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's late for you there. Tell people where they can follow you and watch your show and all that.
Thank you, Graham. So now that I'm censored on YouTube, I suppose it's best to recommend Rumble. So it's rumble.com/Richard Medhurst, patreon.com/Richard Medhurst, and my website is richardmedhurst.com. So that's where people can find me. Yeah.
Dude, I appreciate you being out there. I appreciate you fighting the good fight. I'm sorry that you've joined the fraternity of demonetized and deplatformed YouTube people, but
well, it is what it is. There you go.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for taking the time,
Thank
brother.
you. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
We'll talk soon. If you ever need me to come on your show, I can.
I'd be more than happy. Well, let's do it.
Thank you very much. Let me know.
Thank you, brother. Cheers. Bye-bye.
All right, man. Richard Medhurst, everybody.